The truth is, I really find this part of videos pretty cringy, so I'll make it quick. If you enjoy this video and want to support what I do, please consider liking the video, commenting, and subscribing to the channel to help boost me in the algorithm and to ensure that you get updates on new videos. Thank you. A year ago, my life fell apart when my husband unexpectedly passed away. While I was still drowning in grief, my mom became severely ill. Since she lives alone in her old house, I packed my bags and moved in with her to manage her treatment and take care of her full time. Almost as soon as I arrived, the house started feeling incredibly heavy. My mom, who was bedridden most of the day, kept telling me she heard strange noises in the hallway. She claimed she could hear faint voices calling out her name. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself she was just hallucinating from her medication. I really didn't want to scare myself, but a couple of days later, it was my turn. And what terrified me the most was that it happened in broad daylight. I had just finished doing house chores, and my mom had drifted off to sleep. I walked into her bedroom just to check on her. The moment I stepped through the door, my blood ran cold. Standing right next to her bed was a woman dressed entirely in black. I could see her face with horrifying clarity. Her skin was sickening, deathly pale, and her eyes were massive. She was staring straight at me, eyes wide open, as if they were about to pop out of their sockets. I froze. I completely lost my ability to react or scream. I was sleeping in the bedroom right next to my mom's. I laid down, and just as I was drifting off to sleep, I noticed a dark shadow standing right at the foot of my bed. It wasn't moving. It was completely static. But out of nowhere, I felt a violent yank. Something invisible grabbed me and started dragging me off the bed. It was a sickening sensation. The force was so sudden that my blanket was literally thrown into the air, landing across the room. I panicked, bolted out of bed, and ran into my mom's room to sleep with her. I didn't close my eyes for the rest of the night. The breaking point happened yesterday, when my sister came over to visit us. A few hours before she arrived, I was sitting alone at the kitchen table, eating a quick lunch. Suddenly, I felt a sharp, agonizing pain in both my wrists. It was a suffocating pressure, exactly if someone was grabbing my arms and squeezing them with brute force. The moment I heard my sister's car pull up outside, I ran out of the house. I was sobbing hysterics. I told her I couldn't take it anymore, and that I needed to get out of that place right now. She freaked out, trying to calm me down, and asked what was wrong. When I told her about what just happened in the kitchen, she pulled up my sleeves. We both went completely pale. Deep purple bruises were already forming around both my wrists. You could perfectly see the shape of human fingers pressed into my skin. I broke down completely. "It's him," I cried to my sister. "It's my husband. He doesn't want me to leave our old house. He's looking for me. He won't let me go." But my sister grabbed my face and told me to stop. "No, Lola," she said. "This isn't your husband. This is something evil." She immediately took action. She contacted an aunt of ours who was very close to the local parish priest. The next morning, the priest came over, blessed every single room in the house, and gave me a personal blessing as well. Mercifully, it worked. Since that day, the house has been completely quiet, and whatever was lingering here seems to be gone. But there's a detail that keeps me up at night. A few weeks ago, I found out through some extended family members that my late husband's family was heavily involved in some dark witchcraft practices in their hometown. Nothing has ever been proven, and honestly, I'm too terrified to dig deeper. We live in Utah, and we were on a trip to Seattle to visit some relatives. This happened a couple of years ago. I think we were 17 and 14 at the time. We were staying at a relative's house. However, there wasn't enough bedrooms, so me and my brother slept in the car with our dog. It was extremely uncomfortable, and so we had a hard time getting to sleep. Our dog fell asleep just fine though. The car started getting hot, so we opened some of the doors, and then suddenly at about 10:30, our dog woke up and started whining. Confused, my brother tried to comfort him, while I heard something coming from outside the car that sounded like something snapping. And then, I saw something that looked like a white skinny bear running through the bushes, and it turned and looked at us. I slammed the doors and locked them, but when we looked back, it was gone. About an hour later, we heard something walking on top of the car that sounded heavy. It lasted for what felt like hours, until it finally stopped. We barely got any sleep, and the next morning, my younger sister claimed she saw a man dog out her window. This all took place a couple of years ago, so I might be wrong on some of the details, but that's what I remember. When I was a little kid, I don't know how old, maybe 7 or 8 at the oldest, me and my twin sister shared a bedroom. Our beds were directly across the room from each other, and we'd frequently chat at night. We'd gone out with our mom and older siblings, and came home very late at night. For a 7-year-old anyway, maybe it was 10 p.m. When we got home, it was off to bed with us, and we laid in the dark and talked for a while. My sister seemed really strange, like frozen, unmoving, and not talking. I went and got in bed with her and asked her what was wrong. She said that we had to be brave and run to Mom's room because there was a monster looking at her from beneath my bed that I was just previously laying in. I turned away from her and looked into the dark void that was beneath my bed, and I don't know, I felt it too. There was a monster under the bed. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it watching us. I think we counted to 10 quietly and ran to my mom's room to tell her about the monster. As we stood in the mouth of our mother's doorway crying and hyperventilating, a man ran by our mother's room, slammed the door, and escaped out the back door of the kitchen. A man had broken in while we were away and hid under my bed. I don't think about this often, but sometimes I wonder what would have happened if my sister never sensed him. Spooky shit. People are terrifying. So this story happened about 11 years ago. I was a senior in high school at the time, but it is the single most mind-boggling thing that I have ever experienced. It's also important to note that it happened in mid-December. I am from Iowa, and the winters here get cold at night. Like if you get stuck outside, you will die kind of cold. That, plus the snowfall, makes everything dead silent. You can hear anything and everything inside the house, and even immediately outside of it. Me and my best friend were hanging out in my family's walkout basement, just having a boring winter night, playing video games. We were also the only ones home. The only reason it was just us is because my mother went from work straight to a bar to grab a few drinks with coworkers. So me and my friend thought it would be a good idea to break into the family wine and live a little. As we were sitting there opening up the first bottle, I hear the door to the garage open and slam shut. I immediately go, "Oh shit," and start looking for places to hide the bottle. My friend then says, "I thought you said your mom was supposed to be out all night." "She was," I replied. I then heard a few heavy stomps and hear my mother yell out, "Meows and Boo? Anyone home?" I yell back up the stairs, "Yup, just hanging out in the basement." I hear a few more steps from the garage door towards the stairs, and she yells out again, "Can you come help me with something? I need you up here." I reply back, while frantically trying to find a good place to hide the wine bottle. "Yep, just give me a minute." Then there was silence for about 20 seconds. "Anyone down there with you?" She yelled back in a more concerned, serious tone, in a voice that was slightly off of my mother's. This is the first thing that told me something wasn't right. Our family never cared if anyone was over, as our house was a very open house to all family and friends. And the voice, it was just wrong. Like it sounded like it was my mother's, but it was missing something that I couldn't put my finger on. Weirded out, I reply back, "Just Colton." After I yelled that back to her, I found a good place to hide the bottle and began walking up the stairs to the next level. Now, as I'm walking up the stairs, I couldn't help but feel the overbearing silence of the house and the slight electric twinge that something isn't right. When I got to the top of the steps, I look over to where the door to the garage is, and also the kitchen right next to it. And it's black, pitch black, as if the lights were off, and there was no moonlight shining through any windows. I walked over to the kitchen yelling out, "Mom, where are you?" There was no reply, just silence and darkness. I feel the electric twinge turn into full needles, and my adrenaline kicking in full force. I have to get out of here as fast as possible. My mother was not home. I run back down the stairs, grabbing my coat along the way. "What's wrong?" Colton says. "My mom's not home." I reply as fast as I can, looking for my truck keys. "What do you mean? You were just talking to her." I could see the confusion in his face. "There's no one home. We need to leave now." I took a few steps toward the back door that opens up to the yard, and then I see my dog shaking on the couch, and my cat growling behind it. I couldn't leave them. I just knew that if we left, something would happen. "Are we leaving?" Colton said, still confused as all hell. "No, I can't leave them here alone. Something is really off. I'm going to call my mom and figure this out." I pull out my phone and call my mom. She picks up immediately. "Meows and Boo? What's going on?" She answers. "Mom, were you just home? I heard you yelling for me from the second level, and when I went up there, you weren't there," I said frantically, hoping she was playing a joke. "No, I'm just leaving the bar. I wasn't feeling very well. Are you okay? What do you mean you heard me?" I fill her in on the whole story, and she rushes home. Colton and I stayed in the basement with the animals until she got home. But before she did, you could hear something upstairs. Not walking or sitting on things, but a pressure in the air, like a black hole was slowly moving from one room to the next. And the word that I would indistinctively describe it as is hungry. When she got home, you could feel the thing leave just as quick as it came, like an overbearing predatory presence had just flown away. We still have never figured out what the hell was going on, and this is just one story of many unexplainable things that have happened to us. But this is the easiest to write down, and one that I was happy to have a witness. My mother has passed away now, and I have moved away to Arizona. But whenever I go back to Iowa, and I see Colton, he still gets creeped out by what had happened. I will never truly know what happened, but I know that whatever it was that had my mother's voice, it was evil, and it was hungry. After I got home from school, I made some food and watched TV for a while, and messed around on my computer. My mom texted me a few times reminding me to do my homework and to lock the doors before going to sleep. Later that night, the house started feeling weirdly quiet. Not even creepy at first, just too quiet. I finished my homework, stayed up a bit longer, and eventually went to sleep. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up thirsty and went downstairs to get some water. While I was in the kitchen, my phone buzzed with a text from my mom. "Don't forget to lock the front door." I remember thinking, yeah, I already did, but I still walked over to check. And that's when I saw him. There was an old man standing outside the glass front door, staring directly at me, completely motionless, balding, smiling slightly, and just standing there in the dark. For a few seconds, we looked at each other. Then he slowly tried the door handle. I ran upstairs immediately. I don't think I've ever moved that fast in my life. I locked myself in my room and hid under my bed, even though I knew it was childish. A few moments later, I heard glass shattering downstairs. My heart completely dropped. I could hear footsteps moving around the first floor. Slow footsteps. Floor creaking. Somebody was actually inside my house. I tried not to breathe too loudly. I remember staring at the darkness near my bedroom door, thinking if I saw someone's feet outside the room, I was dead. Then I heard police sirens outside. Right after that, "Police, don't move!" Everything downstairs turned chaotic. Yelling, running, loud footsteps. A few minutes later, an officer came upstairs and told me everything was okay. Apparently, the guy had already been reported lurking around houses in the neighborhood earlier that night, and one of my neighbors called the cops after seeing him outside my house. What still freaks me out is the way he looked at me through the glass door. He looked completely calm, like he already knew he was getting inside. I watched my coworker get arrested, and then found out he had a sinister plan for me. I worked with this man for a little over 3 years. We worked pretty closely on some projects over the last 2 years, and even sat near one another at work. In September, I showed up and saw about 10 detectives at my place of work. I was a bit startled, as this was quite unusual for my area. I looked around and saw that my coworker was in handcuffs, and looked quite disheveled, which wasn't out of the norm, to be honest. I walked up to the detectives, introduced myself, and let them know who I was in relation to him. I asked what was going on, and they filled me in on why he was currently being arrested. For the sake of the case, I won't share more than he was a disgusting person. Over the course of the next 3 hours, I watched as they dismantled his workstation, went through his belongings, took evidence pictures, and so on. I was pulled in and out of rooms answering questions about his character, what I knew of him, and my feelings about him as a person. I told them he gave me a weird feeling in my gut, that I've always told my husband I wouldn't be surprised if the cops ever came looking for him, that my husband even thought he was weird, and if I ever went missing, that he'd be the first person to be suspected. I didn't realize how real this almost was. The detective on site told me that they served a search warrant at his home, and they were looking there for any evidence. It sounds like they found more than they anticipated, and were looking to see if there was anything else unrelated to what they were currently investigating. I was asked my name and my husband's name for confirmation for something they found, which I did think was odd, but I let it go and called my husband to update him on the happenings of the day thus far. However, the last hour I was pulled in for the final time and advised by one of the lead detectives, who couldn't even look at me, that I needed to ensure I was safe and protected in the event that they didn't book him that day. Come to find out, he had been journaling about me over the course of at least a year, saying he wanted to be with me, but the problem was that I was married. His journal then lined out a plan to set my husband up for cheating on me. In the end, resulted in my death, caused by him, my coworker. The officer said that everything in between was more vile than he's ever heard, to the point he was crying when he was telling me to make sure I was safe. Crying, a detective, and that he didn't want to scare me. Thankfully, he was charged, and it's looking like a long, long time in prison. But I still think about it. It keeps me up at night. It just shows you never really know someone, even your coworkers. The year is approximately 1998 to 1999. I was a young gay man in my early 20s, living in a medium-sized city in the Midwestern US. This was sort of an in-between transitional time for gay people, where in most populous areas, we had enough respect to live openly, but there were still plenty of people who did not like us. It was well before the invention of smartphones, and the internet was still in the early stages of mass adoption. There were large communities online, but it was not yet at the point where most Americans were online. Online socialization consisted of chat rooms, hosted by various services like AOL, Yahoo, or IRC servers, and message boards were still in use by large numbers of people. For gay men at the time, it was nothing short of revolutionary. Prior to the internet, and to the broader cultural changes, gay men had been stuck looking for fun in secretive and/or shady places due to the inability to freely express ourselves. In the 90s, it was still somewhat risky, but the internet offered a way to talk freely and relatively anonymously, without the risk of being outed, or worse. For this reason, it really took off in the gay communities, and gay men were a large part of the user bases for these social platforms. It was suddenly very easy, and relatively safe, to find dates, friends, or just sex, and it quickly became the norm for a lot of gay men. On the other hand, being such a new communication tool for most people, we were sometimes blind to the risks. Being an attractive young man in my prime, I made liberal use of online communities to find dates. That is to say, I had plenty of hookups. My city had a decent number of chat rooms and personal message boards, and I had mostly great experiences. I met the typical assortment of good guys, closet cases, and weirdos that you'd expect. I wasn't an absolute hoe by any standards, but suffice to say that a cute gay guy at that time could generally have a lot more dates than your typical straight person. At some point during this time, I'd had some brief chats on a message board with a guy from my city. I forgot his screen name because it's been over 20 years, so let's just call him Slim Guy 65. This back and forth had happened on a general thread in the gay section, not in private messages, so it was visible to anyone who chose to read that thread. Nothing had come of it, but about a week later, I received an email from an unrecognized address. The email basically said, "Hey, I'm not gay, and I don't agree with the gay lifestyle. I'm here because my friend met this Slim Guy 65 person from this message board, and the guy really hurt him. I don't want this to happen to anyone else. My friend tried to tell the police, but they wouldn't do anything. I see you were talking to Slim Guy 65, so just be careful and stay away from him." Okay, that's strange. What does this person mean by really hurt him? Was his heart broken? Did he get beaten up or verbally abused, or what? I responded to the email asking for clarification on what exactly happened. I never received a response. I was slightly weirded out by it, but on the other hand, it was an anonymous email from someone who doesn't respond and is vague about their warning. This could be anything. It could be some disgruntled ex trying to mess with the guy. It could be a real warning about some gay bashing. It could be someone trolling who doesn't have anything to do with anyone. I kept it in the back of my mind, but pretty much shrugged it off. Several weeks later, I had a weekday off work and decided to take to the internet to fish for some, as was my custom. Lo and behold, I had an email response to a personal ad. It was Slim Guy 65. He was offering to meet at his place to hang out and just have a good time. Wink wink, nudge nudge. I won't go into details, and as I recall, there weren't really many details discussed other than the small talk and intros we'd done previously. Nothing about this guy was really sounding interesting to me, but I had no other offers on this day, so I decided why not. I'll go see what this dude is about. As I typed my reply, I suddenly remembered the strange email I'd received warning about this person. I went back and reread it. Still vague, still presenting more questions and no answers. Should I take this anonymous warning at face value and just ignore Slim Guy 65? I decided to go check him out anyway. His address was on a rather busy street in the middle of a dense residential area, not some shack out in the woods, and I can handle myself. If he's weird, I can just get the fuck out of there. Before long, I arrived at the house at the agreed time. It was a duplex-style house, with one apartment on the ground floor and one on the second floor, part of a row of several identical duplexes. It was in the middle of the afternoon, and there was plenty of traffic on the street and the occasional person out on the porch, or in their backyard. I pulled up the driveway to the parking area behind the house, got out and knocked on the door. The guy that answered was a pretty normal, kind of mousy-looking man, probably in his 40s. Slight, slim build, soft-spoken, looked like any guy working in an office cubicle somewhere. Not really my type, but honestly my curiosity was piqued, and I had nothing better to do, so I stepped inside to take a look around and gauge the situation, with the warning email fresh in my mind. I stepped into the back door, into the kitchen. It was very clean, and there was nothing out on the counters, and no table, or chairs, or anything. That is to say, it did not look like someone was living there. It had been kept up and cleaned, but looked empty. Looking out into the apartment, I could see that it was not set up as a living space. A large window with sliding glass was between the kitchen and living room, and I could see what looked like a large table in the living room area. SG65 said something like, "This isn't where I live," or "A friend of mine used to run a doctor's office here." I maintained the building for him. It's private though, and we have the place to ourselves. Weird, but okay. He shut the back door and locked it, with a keyed deadbolt. The kind that you need a key to open, even from the inside, and put his keys in his pockets, saying, "So, what do you want to do?" At this point, my danger sense spiked. This is not a normal home, and why is he locking the door like that? It's not necessarily suspect. A lot of people have that sort of lock on their door, and the door is a window, so it even makes sense. Still, something is not right here. I can tell, and now I'm locked in. I asked him why he was locking the door like that, which immediately flustered him. He was looking rather nervous, and his voice was a little wavery and halting. Not quite stuttering, but almost. He said, well, we don't want someone, to come in and, interrupt us, right?" Flashing a weak, unconvincing smile. His demeanor and body language were all I needed to confirm that this guy was up to no good. Or, at least, there was something he was hiding. However, I could tell that I was intimidating him. I was not a particularly muscular kid, but I have a larger frame. Like, even when I'm at my very thinnest, I still wear large-sized tops and 36 waist pants. So I look big, which people tend to interpret as me being stronger than I really am. Also, I'm not a tough guy at all, but I have a resting facial expression that makes me look like a badass thug. People who don't know me often assume that I'm rough or something. I sometimes use this to my advantage while I can, because before long, a new acquaintance will eventually figure out that I'm a total wimp. But this was definitely an occasion to play up the tough guy appearance, and I did exactly that. I put on my best steely face, and told him to unlock the door, and that I don't want to be locked in here. He looked for a moment like he was going to pee his pants, and then he said, "Okay, alright, I'll unlock this." He unlocked the deadbolt, and I'll just lock the knob here, and he turned the little dial that locks the doorknob. That was fine with me. I continued to stare at him until he said, "I'll leave the keys on the countertop right here," and he set his keys down near the sink. I was relatively satisfied with that answer. At this point, though, my adrenaline was flowing, and I was almost in full fight or flight mode, but I was kind of stuck in place. The guy was between me and the door. I was freaked out, but this little weasel did not appear to pose any immediate physical threat to me. I could tell that his pants pockets were empty, and that I was intimidating the living hell out of him. I didn't know yet exactly what to do. Now, keep in mind that despite my wordy descriptions, this all happened very quickly, without any really long pauses. It had only been maybe 1 or 2 minutes since I stepped in the door. This all happened at the pace of a conversation. The guy was obviously nervous and trying not to appear so. He said, "Well, let's go in," and walked a wide path around me through the kitchen into what would normally be the living room, and toward the hall to the right from there. I was familiar with this floor layout. It is very common in this area. The hallway would lead to 2 small bedrooms, with a bathroom in between them. I hesitated, thinking I should walk out that back door and take off. But really, now I was super curious. I knew there's no way in hell I'm doing anything with this guy, but I kinda want to see what's going on in here. Also, I'm confident that he can't take me if it comes to a fight, so I slowly headed toward the living room. It felt like I was walking in slow motion. From the kitchen entrance, I could see a large rectangular stainless steel table, taking up a lot of the living room. I remember thinking, this looks like a surgical table. It looked like it could rise and tilt, and it had a recessed channel, running all the way around the edge. In hindsight, I now know what that was, and it was 100% a mortician's table. Dude had a mortician's table in there, but at that time, I thought it looked like a medical table of some sort. There was also some other office-type cabinets and stuff around, I think, but now all I really remember is the table in that room. The large front window looking out onto the street was covered by vertical blinds that were closed. SG-65 said something like, "This used to be a doctor's office, like I said. Come on back here." The hallway revealed the room setup that I expected. The first bedroom door was closed. The second door was open to a small, very clean bathroom. At the end of the hall was the other bedroom, which looked like, if the doctor's office story was true, had at one time been converted to an exam room. He said, "We can go in that room if you want. Go ahead, take a look." And he stayed by the other closed bedroom door. The back bedroom door was open, and I could see that the walls were covered in a honey-colored wood paneling, the type you might see in a den or office that hasn't been updated since the early 1970s. I slowly took a step down to that door, trying to be very aware of what Mr. Creepy was doing behind me. He didn't move. When I got up to that room, the first thing I noticed was the door had a keyed deadbolt lock. like the back door. This room locked from the outside. I wondered if there was a lever on the inside, but I pretty much knew the answer to that question without needing to check. I also saw a chair. A non-swiveling plastic desk chair with thin metal legs sitting near the center of the room. The room had old, dark carpet and those wood-paneled walls. I noticed that the walls were completely paneled with no windows, and I knew that room had at least one window, probably two, so whoever did that paneling went over the windows. There was also a phone in there, plugged in, and sitting on the floor. It was an old office phone, probably from around the 80s or early 90s. Dingy beige plastic, with several buttons to manage different phone lines. Just sitting on the carpet near the wall, with the chair at a slight distance facing the phone. There was nothing else in that room. I was standing at the threshold of that room with one foot slightly in, absolutely not going past that door. I looked back at the dude. He was still standing by the other door, just nervously smiling at me, trying hard to look casual, but obviously very nervous, or something. He said something like, well, what do you want to do? Instead of answering, I felt around the backside of the deadbolt lock. Sure enough, nothing there but the smooth wood of the door. It also dawned on me that I did not see a light switch anywhere for the ceiling lamp. Where was the switch? Who knows? It should have been just inside the door, of course, but the original switch was covered up by the paneling. He mumbled something about not having the key to that lock. Don't worry about it. I turned back to face the guy and just said, "What is it that you want to do here?" My skin had gone ice cold as I realized that I was way too far into this apartment. I was running through my options in my head. What is this guy going to do? He doesn't appear to have any weapons or anything in reach, but who the fuck knows what is going on in this place? What are you trying to do? He was almost totally derailed by that. He stammered out, some hot man-to-man fun? With the weakest smile I've ever seen, looking like he was just a hair's breadth away from panicking. That sounds comical, but really, that sentence was probably the most chilling part of the entire experience for me. It was the way he said it. Like he had come up with something on the fly, something that would sound plausible. And he failed. Who says that in real life? Hey, do you want to have some hot man-to-man fun? Nobody. It's something you'd see on an advertisement for some cheesy porn site or something. That was it. I said, "Nope, I want to go. I'm leaving." He said, okay. I quickly walked past him as he flattened himself against the wall to avoid me. And I noped right out through the living room dissection area and through the kitchen to the back door, which was thankfully still not deadbolted. The keys were still on the counter. I let myself out the door and didn't bother closing that. As I saw him slowly coming to the door behind me, I deliberately walked, not ran, to my car. Looking back at the building, I could see that indeed there was a window facing the backyard area from that paneled room, but of course it was covered up from the inside. Dude was shutting and locking the back door. And I left, heart pounding, skin icy cold, thinking, holy fuck, what was that? So, was this guy some kind of a killer? Or was it just an awkward, closeted gay guy, with access to a sterile-looking apartment with an autopsy and mortuary table, in a windowless room that locks from the outside, with a chair and a phone, and no light switch? It's clear to me that the poor soul who walks into that room gets locked in. He probably shuts off the light from somewhere, and calls the phone. Other than that, it's anyone's guess what happens. I assume the friend of the judgmental person who emailed me must have been some kid that got locked in for whatever game ensues. Driving home, at first I thought, of course, I have to call the police and tell them what's in that place. But thinking it through, I realized I didn't really have any crime to tell them about. I went to meet a man for casual sex, and what? He has a room with a chair in it. He has, as I thought at the time, an exam table. The police aren't going to do anything with that story. The guy didn't touch me or do anything to me, and I left. I considered calling an anonymous tip line, but again, what exactly would I report? There was no actionable crime. Also, keep in mind that at that time, while the local police in the city were pretty decent, they weren't especially interested in getting involved with helping the gays. They'd prosecute actual crimes if it was cut and dry, but I'd heard plenty of accounts of them not choosing to follow up on cases where there was not an easy arrest to be made. I decided not to report anything because nothing could come of it except drawing unwanted attention to myself. Even in retrospect, I think it was probably the most rational choice to make. If this happened today in 2020, the law enforcement would probably be a lot more interested in it. But back then, not so much. So, live and learn. I still drove past that house once in a while, in the normal course of life for several years, and I'd pay attention to how it looked. The vertical blinds were closed for maybe 5 or 6 years whenever I went past. Then, eventually, the blinds were down, and there were decorative curtains in the window. So I assume the place was eventually sold to someone who actually lived in it. Around 2002, maybe 2003, there was a murder of a young man on the news. He'd been found in the next state, which borders on my city, so it's not very far away. I recognized the guy from the gay community, but didn't know him personally. A friend mentioned to me something about the local serial killer. I said, "What?" He explained that a few young men had gone missing over the past year, each after being at one specific dive bar, and each being found several miles to the north past the state line, and out in the country. The case on the news matched up with that MO. My friend told me that the young guy had been at that bar, and left with someone the night that he disappeared. The news report didn't mention anything about a gay bar, or similar recent cases, of course. I had to wonder if my acquaintance from the internet had anything to do with it. The location of the murders apparently was nowhere near that duplex, at least according to the story I was told. I never heard of a resolution to that murder on the news, or any official mention of suspected serial killers, other than some gossip. So, that happened. I was about 10 or 11 when this happened. My mom and my brothers and I lived in a tribal housing house, Rabbit Ridge, located in Kashina, Wisconsin. They all went to my grams for the evening and asked if I wanted to come with. I wanted to stay home, so I was by myself. I ended up hearing this tapping noise for like 5 minutes, and I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. My mom had this drum set in the corner of our living room, and I specifically remember watching American Dad and turned it down and determined it was coming from the drum set. I went and checked to see if maybe a mouse or something got stuck in one of the drums. I ended up seeing the top one of the drums ripple after I heard the tapping noise, but I didn't see anything in the drum. I kinda got scared, but more intrigued. I saw and heard the drum hit again, so I hit it myself a little harder. And the thing, whatever it was, hit it back, just as hard. I did this like 5 more times, and it was responding. I wanted to continue to do this, but it deep down started to really freak me out. I did it one more time, and got no response. I did it again, and still no response. All of a sudden, from the back of my hallway, I heard something sprinting down the hallway right at me. All I thought to do was cover up and plug my ears. I then uncovered my ears, and didn't see anything, but could feel something evil watching me. I remember sweating so bad that I could feel what felt like each droplet on my head and back. I called my grandpa, panicked, and had him come and get me. Anyhow, some 20 years later, 6 months ago, my uncle called me and was really freaked out. He said he had this horrible dream where he was back at the old house in Rabbit Ridge at nighttime. He said he could hear his mom, my grandma, screaming from inside the house. And my grandma went running out and said there was something in the back room. He said he went to go see what it was, and when he went to the back room, he said the house was the same setup as when we were kids, when I was living there. He said he saw this man sitting on the bed, looking at him with an inhumanly big smile. Now Aaron, my uncle, asked him who he was, and he stated, "Don't you remember me?" Aaron said, "No. Who are you?" He said, "I'm the man that was fucking with your nephew all them years ago on the drum set." Aaron then said his heart dropped, and he got super freaked out, and the man jumped out the window. Now, I don't know what to think, but I do believe those two things were connected. Aaron showed me a picture of what the guy, or thing, looked like. I find it super odd that 20 years had to pass, and we have our own families now. This memory still sends chills down my spine.